The October chill nipped at Emily's arms as she followed Dave's steady pace along the narrow hiking trail. She still wasn't sure how she had let him talk her into this impromptu night hike deep in the forest preserve when they had met earlier that evening for drinks. Emily had immediately sensed Dave's enthusiastic yet forceful personality. Charming at first, but hinting at darker passions below the surface. But his attentiveness and good looks won her over. He insisted this trail was a must. During golden hour, promising breathtaking views to end the night. Emily reasoned her intuition may be overreacting. After all, they had been chatting online for weeks with no issues. Perhaps she should give him the benefit of the doubt and see where the evening led. Now, as night closed in, every cracking twig and shifting shadow triggered Emily's growing anxiety. She had only Dave's faint flashlight beam to guide her unsure steps on the uneven ground. He charged ahead without pause, forcing her into an awkward half-jog to keep up that aggravated her twisting ankle on the rocky slope. Her doubt returned in full force. Why had she let him push her so far from the parking lot alone after sunset? Emily opened her mouth to suggest turning back when Dave spun to face her. Light held aloft under his sharp jawline. His intense blue eyes bore into hers, grin stretching a bit too wide. Nearly there, I promise. You'll be impressed. Beautiful views are worth a little risk. She nodded reluctantly and let him take her hand to pull her along. The forest gave way to a grassy ridgeline, with a stunning overlook of the valley far below, bathed in pale moonlight. Emily had to admit, it took her breath away. Dave stepped close behind, wrapping his arms around her waist and nuzzling her neck. I told you it was worth it. What do you think now, Emmy? His breath was hot against her ear, gripped tighter than a hug. Emily stiffened at the unwanted intimacy. Dave, please. She tried maneuvering out of his grasp, but he only held on harder. What's the problem? I thought we had a connection, he growled into her hair. We're alone out here. No one to stop us. I can make you feel good. Panic flooded Emily's veins as she renewed her struggle in vain. Dave was too strong, his eyes gleaming with something dark and animalistic now. She choked out, "Let me go right now, or I'll scream, I swear." For a long moment they froze there, Emily trembling while Dave scowled down at her. Then his face contorted in anger, and he shoved her away hard. Emily stumbled off balance at the ridgeline's crumbling edge, arms flailing as loose rocks gave way underneath her. She saw nothing but open night sky, framed by treetops rushing up to meet her, before everything went black. The lingering scent of damp soil and decay filled Emily's nostrils as she fought back to consciousness. Pain shot through her body, hot waves radiating from her twisted ankle. Darkness enveloped her, branches clawing at her clothes and skin as she rolled down the sheer hillside. Branches slapping and rocks jabbing relentlessly. Finally, she slammed into something solid, air punching from her lungs on impact. Stars swam before her eyes, but she clung to awareness, panting shallowly as tears welled up. Somehow she had survived the long fall, crumpled at the base of a large pine, the forest sounds rushing back, creaking trees, fluttering leaves, small night creatures scurrying amid the undergrowth, and something else. A metallic scrape and jangling that didn't fit, periodic and faint, yet steadily drawing nearer through the dense blackness. Panic lent Emily new strength, and she began dragging herself along, blindly, crying out from each movement. Her foot flopped uselessly behind, twisted at an unnatural angle. Every scraping step closed the predator's distance. Emily pushed on through pain and panic, praying she could find shelter before it found her first. Up ahead loomed a shape more substantial than trees. An old wooden shed, walls visible through gaps in rotting boards. Emily hauled herself inside just as yellow flashlight beam pierced the night behind, sweeping purposefully through the shadows. Heart pounding, she huddled in the darkest corner, clamping a hand over her mouth to stifle any sound that might reveal her hiding place. The light swung nearer, nearer, then clicked off, submerging the forest in even thicker gloom. Something rustled leaves outside, paused, then moved off into the night. For now, she was concealed, but trapped with a ruthless hunter still lurking in the dark. Emily didn't dare breathe as the heavy footsteps faded into the distance. She strained to hear any signs the intruder still prowled nearby, but only the usual creaks and sighs of the forest at night responded. Her escape into the tool shed had bought some reprieve, yet offered no comfort. The space was little more than a hollow square of frayed wood walls, strewn with rusted junk left to decay over time. A feeble moonbeam filtered through gaps, barely illuminating the dirt floor. Emily huddled in the deepest shadows, clammy skin stuck to the mildewed walls. Her throbbing ankle had swollen to twice its normal size inside her torn jeans, purpling bruises spreading across her pale flesh. Sharp pain shot through the broken joint anytime she shifted position. Drawing, gasping cries from gritted teeth. But she knew she couldn't stay still. She had to find help before blood loss, or the prowling intruder finished her off for good. With agony, Emily rolled onto her good leg and began feeling around the cluttered floor. Her scrabbling fingers closed around something long and metallic, a rusty saw whose handle had worn down to rough edges. It was poor protection, but better than nothing against whatever stalked the forest this night. Emily tucked the saw under one arm and dragged herself inch by excruciating inch to a cracked window on hands and knees. She lifted her head above the sill with care, peering out into dark masses of evergreen branches, swaying and rustling in the chill breeze. Nothing alarming caught her eye at first. Then, a shadow split off from the trees, a looming figure stealing through the shadows with eerie, sure footedness. Emily jerked back with a stifled gasp, heart pounding wildly. Had it seen her movement? She listened with bated breath, catching only cracked leaves shuffling underfoot as the thing prowled the tree line, circling the shed. Emily shrank deeper into shadow, pressing a hand to her mouth to muffle panicked whimpers. The shadow glided away through the outer gloom, then paused. A twig snapped too deliberately to be accidental. Emily's blood turned to ice. It knew she was here. She began whimpering frantically through clenched fingers, unaware of the tears and snot coating her face. Too hurt to run, too exposed to stay still, Emily had never felt so helpless, toyed with by an unseen predator, toying with its cornered prey. Unthinkable images of what awaited her out there. If it forced its way inside, scrambled her reason. Escape seemed impossible, yet surrender meant certain death. Time stretched into an agony of fear as night wore on, the circling shadow returning sporadically to stalk the perimeter of her crumbling shelter. Emily kept herself pressed into total stillness between bouts of sobbing, thoughts unraveling under pressure of fear and injury. The cold moon climbed its peak and started its downward arc. But still, no sign the hunter would lose interest and move on. By now, her rational mind had snapped, reduced to an instinctive animal, squirming in a snare. All that remained was to wait and see if morning light would bring salvation or doom. Twilight was the worst, the deep blue sky slowly lightening as dawn approached, yet dense shadows still cloaking the forest. Emily dozed fitfully inside her meager shelter, plunging back into nightmares at any small creaks or rustles outside the wall. Her ankle pulsed with agony, sickly warmth radiating up her leg. She knew infection had already set in from the dirt and debris ground into the wounds during her reckless descent down the hillside. Escape seemed less and less likely by the hour. Emily tried crawling to the window again, but her strength had ebbed too far, and moving jostled razor-edged pains through her swollen joint. She collapsed back with a sob, uselessly twisting dirtied clothes around the worst of the swelling. To slow its progress, her water was gone. Phone presumably smashed somewhere in the undergrowth miles away. Starvation and fever were distant concerns if that prowling shadow didn't get to her first. Emily forced down panic, scrambling for calmer thinking, despite delirium's grip. Perhaps rescue was closer than it seemed. She might be within earshot of the hiking trail if she could shout loudly enough. With immense effort, Emily dragged herself up the wall and took a deep breath to scream. Then a sound froze her, solid. The crackle of undergrowth right outside the shed. Heart nearly bursting from her chest. Emily scrabbled backward on her elbows as slow, heavy footsteps circled the building. A shape passed by a slit between boards, tall and indistinct in the gloom. Emily curled into a ball, clamping both hands over her mouth to muffle whimpers. The thing stopped just outside, seeming to peer through the walls at her. A low, chilling laugh echoed, taunting in its inhuman cadence. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, shaking uncontrollably as hot tears leaked free. It knew she was watching, was playing with her like a cat does a mouse. The laugh faded, but the thing lingered at the threshold, as if waiting for her courage to break, so it could slide inside for the kill. Emily lost track of time, drifting in and out of consciousness, barely clinging to wakefulness each time. The shadow continued its sporadic passes, pressing closer to the shed with each circuit as dawn stretched on, endlessly. Every creak brought terror, a new imagination, running wild with each scenario of what might tear through the wall of rotting planks at any moment. By late morning, Emily had retreated so far into delirium that reality blurred. Sometimes it was Dave's hateful sneer, peering between the cracks. Other times, the tall shadow merged with her memories of hiking the night before. She no longer knew if the scraping at the door was real or in her mind, shrinking from ghosts as much as what prowled outside. Time had no meaning. She was adrift between living nightmare and death's threshold, awaiting the final push into the abyss. The day crawled by at a painfully slow pace. Emily drifted in and out of consciousness, too weary to care whether the sounds outside were real or imagined. Her delirium had reached a fever pitch. Distorted memories and visions swirled together into a hellish kaleidoscope. At times she was back in the forest with Dave. His rage, twisted face growing horns and fangs as he lunged for her throats. Other moments she saw charred skeletons littering the forest floor, reaching bony fingers out to grab her ankles. The shadowy figure at the shed blended into these horrors, materializing from the smoky tree line to peer through gaps in the wall with gleaming eyes. Emily woke with a start, unsure how long she'd been asleep. Dusk was falling once more, bathing the tool shed in inky shadows. She was parched beyond thirst, throat feeling scraped raw from the inside. Her ankle had turned an angry purple, veiny lines crawling up her calf. Infection was setting in fast without treatment. She scrabbled pathetically at the filthy wall, unable to drag herself any closer to the window slit. Beyond, The forest was draped in gloom, branches swaying in another gust of wind. A faint rustle caught Emily's attention. Movement opposite the shed, nearly imperceptible. Her eyes strained to pierce the murk. Was it a trick of her addled mind, or did something shift just past the tree line? Emily held her breath, every fiber tensed. There, a shadow detached itself from the trees, gliding sinuously towards the shed. Emily crouched against the wall, saw clenched weakly in her fist. Would this be the moment of truth, when the hunter finally snatched its prey? The shadow slowed as it emerged into a moonbeam's path, towering over 6 feet tall. But it wasn't a man. Emily stifled a shriek at the sight of twisted antlers branching from its misshapen skull. As it crept closer, an unnatural sight resolved from the swirling mists of delirium. A gaunt, emaciated figure with ink-black eyes and ashen skin stretched taut over. Realization brought no comfort or clarity. This was no beast of nature, come to finish her. It was something far fell and nameless that had stalked her this whole time. Emily scrambled backward on her elbows, mind spiraling into an abyss as the creature's peeling lips split in a twisted grin. This was how she would meet her end, prey for the depths of the forest's corrupted heart. The door creaked open, and the thing stepped silently inside. The creature moved with a disturbing, loping gait, as if its limbs were jointed the wrong way. Emily scrabbled frantically against the wall, too weak to flee as it approached. Her mind was a blank void of terror, reduced to primal instinct. With a rattle like dry bones knocking, the thing tilted its nightmarish skull. 2 black pits regarded Emily from behind strands of dead flesh, hanging where eyes should be. A gagging stench of rot and copper filled the small space. It reached out, spindly talons slowly, as if savoring her panic. Emily lashed out with the saw, scraping feebly against leathered skin. The thing only grinned wider, clicking its jagged teeth together in mangled amusement. It seized Emily's wrist with shocking strength, fingers biting deep. She screamed and flailed uselessly with her other hand, too frail to break free. The thing lowered its face to hers, putrid breath oozing over her skin. Emily screwed her eyes shut, bracing for end. Instead, a wet snuffling swept her cheek, and the grip suddenly went lax. She dared to crack one eye open. The creature tilted its head, regarding her limp form curiously, like a scientist examining a specimen. It released her arm, though Emily was too weak to pull away. The thing circled her slowly, bony fingers ghosting over clammy skin, as if recalling something long forgotten. Emily shuddered at its violation, pulse sluggish from blood loss and dehydration. Death or sanity's remnants, either would be release at this point. The creature finished its inspection and stood ponderously. Emily expected a killing blow, but it only made a gurgling sound she realized was laughter. It leaned in and hissed 2 sibilant words that curdled her marrow. Soon, prey. Before Emily could react, it turned and looped back out into the gathering dark. She lay there, shell-shocked, wondering if this was truly the end, or if her frail heart would keep beating a while longer. The true terror was not knowing which fate was worse: a swift death, or becoming subject to that thing's deranged experiments until her mind and body broke down completely. Outside, the forest fell still once more. Emily curled onto her side with a whimper, barely conscious yet alive through some twisted joke of circumstance. Survival seemed more a curse than blessing at this point. As blackness pulled her under, the last thing she saw was fog swirling thickly among the trees, concealing the true horrors that lurked within. When Emily next awoke, pale dawn, light filtered through the walls of the tool shed. She lay disoriented, unsure if the previous night's ordeal had been bizarre fever dreams or something far worse. Her ankle was grotesque, shiny skin, stretched, taut, and throbbing. As she struggled to sit upright, a glint in the dirt caught her eye. Her phone, miraculously undamaged from its fall. Its presence solidified the horrible reality. Rescue was near if she could get a signal out. Emily grasped the phone with shaking hands and dragged herself toward the door on her elbows. Outside, the forest was hushed and draped in mist, no sign of the shadowy creature that had terrorized her. She turned on her phone with bated breath. One bar flickered in the corner. Hope surged as she dialed 911 with clumsy fingers. The call connected after agonizing rings. 911. What is your emergency? As Emily broke down, sobbing her location, relief made her giddy, half believing she'd wake again in nightmare. Paramedics arrived within the hour and airlifted her to the trauma unit. Days passed in a haze of medication and police questioning about what really happened in those woods. When Emily was well enough, she insisted on returning to identify Dave from photos. His image sent ice through her veins. Wrathful gaze burned into memory. The police confirmed he was wanted for assaulting other women and had gone off the grid. As for the ghoulish entity, the authorities shrugged it off as hallucination brought on by trauma. But Emily knew the truth deep in her bones, that something ancient and malevolent still stalked those cursed forests after dark, preying on lost souls. Weeks later, as she started healing, Dave's face still surfaced amid nightmares. Emily resolved to leave that chapter of horrors behind and start fresh somewhere new, far from the wood's malefic grasp. Whether merely madness or glimpses of a festering evil, she'd never set foot in those trees again. Some mysteries were better left undiscovered, their terrors sealed deep in shadows where they belonged.